with approval of the agenda and the May minutes.
I make a motion to approve both.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Public comment? Maybe a question for Angelica? There's nobody in the room. Anybody online?
We don't have anybody online today.
Okay. Thank you. Moving right along to, the Clean Water Fund criteria. So we talked about this, I guess has it been 4 months already for that first time when we were upstairs?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, we talked about kind of setting up some criteria for that fund. Did we settle on a name, or is it just me that uses different names every few days? Is it Buncombe County Clean Water Fund?
That's what I've been calling it.
Okay. Buncombe County Clean Water Fund. Eventually we'll type it on something and it'll be official.
It is,
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
right there.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I think we need at least 2 months of acronym discussion first, though.
Yeah. Yeah, what is that exactly? Yeah. So does everybody have a copy of the proposed criteria?
It was sent out in the
Okay,
email.
got it, good. Just criteria around, that we can provide to staff to help get things off in terms of the criteria.
You want me to hit?
Yeah, do you want to kind of go through the
So
bullets?
when we had that discussion, we agreed that we would try to kind of take a first stab at this with the draft criteria. And the key thing that I took away from that conversation was we really wanted it to be pretty focused. We didn't want this to be broad. So we specifically went for limiting criteria because, right, this is a pilot program. We have $100,000 and we also agreed that this committee would be the ones ranking it and all of that. And so we wanted it pretty much everything already pre-vetted in a way. And so hence that was why we said we would do the approved or adopted, this is number 3 in the criteria, look at approved or adopted watershed management plans and where we will actually list the plans so it is very clear to people what plans will be eligible, right? So that is, it's purposefully narrow in what we're doing there. So that was one of the key things. And then you can see here, things around public benefit, all the things that we'd have to have there, the pathway to required permits, all of that type of stuff in the criteria. So hopefully then, with that type of criteria, it does really limit which ones we get. So we get very good projects, proposals. And then the below part here is then the rubric, the criteria for then ranking those that we do get. And when I did that, I just tried to go, very simple and straightforward with it. The 2 specific areas I felt, I know I sent it to Maggie and I got some feedback from Maggie and some Parker. And the 2 areas that I felt like we definitely needed to discuss is the parts I put in red there. One is that with that funding, I had just put up to $100,000. Do we just want to say that, or do we want to provide a very specific range with the projects? And so we need to decide on that part. And then the other one around the number 7, around the must leverage funds. With that, do we want to include in kind? And just kind of that part with those leveraging funds, making sure that we're all on the same page of what we mean by those leveraging the funds. With that part, those were the 2 that I just wasn't, didn't feel like I had enough to say the specificity there. So I felt like we need to have a discussion on those 2 points. And of course, if there's something else on there that folks have comments or whatever about as well. But I guess for me, like starting with that range, I feel like we probably need to say the range of the projects because I'm guessing we don't want like a request for a $500 project, right?
Yeah.
So
The range of the total cost or the range of the grant that we feel like we want?
I was the grant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
I
I'm
think
curious.
from a staff perspective, we would want to push that minimum up to
Okay.
a higher amount.
Okay.
To limit the number of grants for this pilot program, so that from a staff perspective, we don't have, all $5,000 projects. If we could have three $30,000 projects, that would be more beneficial from a staff perspective, so. But you all can set the limit, that would just be staff's preference.
And that was kind of my recall from that conversation too. So I just wanted, so what would be, from the staff perspective, what would be the recommendation for that range?
Yeah, I would think like a minimum of 30,000. So, and then I don't know how y'all feel about 100,000 being the max, but would you be okay with one project taking all the 100, or do you want multiple? So,
I guess the question that comes to mind too is like, what type of costs do we expect being normal for this? Like, I can think of times when I've been in a grantor role and it's like, you just can't get anything done for 15 grand. It's just never gonna happen. And so I don't really have the scale of project weight sizes.
Well, I'm glad Jennifer just walked in because there's a contract, lots of them it seem like are less than 30,000.
Okay,
What about the price of water stream restoration projects and costs?
Yeah, it depends on the scale and scope of them. Sorry I'm late, there was an excavator being unloaded on my road and I couldn't go anywhere. So yeah, it really depends on, are we talking 100 feet? Are we talking 1,000 feet?
Yeah.
Is it something more in a field, fencing versus stabilization or something like that, so.
So what we were talking about, Jennifer, is like that range, like what would be a good range for those grants? Like, should we say 30,000 to 100,000? Should it be more like, I'm making this up, 15,000 to what have you? Knowing that we're wanting to kind of limit the vetted projects and everything.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we need to consider is capacity. So the smaller the projects, the more we have, and do we have capacity to do those well? Manage that process well. And maybe if we're considering this being a multi-year, not a multi-year fund, but ongoing, maybe we keep it simpler in the first year. And the other thing, sorry if you've already mentioned this, but by the time we get this off the ground, since this isn't in a multi-year fund, these projects are going to need to be done by June, end of June. So that is a really shortened timeline, especially if any permitting is necessary. So
there are some ways around that, but
Yeah.
again, it's staff management to roll the funds forward. And Samantha can talk about how they handle that, and because she's with Strategic Partnerships, I'm sure I should have introduced her. Do you want to just quickly say your department and what you do?
Thanks. I'm Samantha Bowers. I am in the Strategic Partnership Office. Rachel Nygaard is the director. She's on vacay, hence me sitting here right now for this meeting. I am focused more on the federal grants, specifically the COVID recovery fund that the county is administering out into the community. And my background involves 20 plus years of grant management in the nonprofit and local governmental sector. So I'm happy to be here, guys.
Beautiful. So she's going to help us on the staff side. But I think there are ways around that. But ideally, we would be able to execute and pay this out and have it be completed within the fiscal year. That's the ideal.
Okay.
And also with it being a pilot project, so we'd like to see the results and if it's working, and then decide if we're going to do it, for next year.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
I've thought too from my funding experience, especially if it's a pilot. Now this is different. We're not a nonprofit that's going to have to sell the results of our pilot to a bunch of funders. We're calling it a pilot for a reason, right? And so if we only had one project, that can kind of really limit the story that we might want to create if we need to make the case to dedicate more funds over time. Like say, just that project has a lot of problems, and then suddenly the memory in the community is like that fund didn't go well. So you can diversify to make sure we at least have 2 or 3. But that might be we don't need to fundraise in the same way that others do.
The other thing to consider here with these funds are that perhaps they can provide a match to some other grant or some other project that's looking to help get it over the finish line. Again, the timing is maybe a little challenging on that because usually if you don't have the match, then it can limit you from getting the grant to begin with, but sometimes we have wiggle room to be able to find it after. Which could mean that we could see bigger projects with a smaller investment on our side that, so I don't know, there's many ways that this could go, really, and there's certainly plenty of need out there.
Would you say 30 to 70 or 25 to 75 or?
Well, and I would lean towards saying, whatever our bottom number is, whatever we decide on, I would lean on saying up to 100, right? And it doesn't mean that we have to only do one, but if there was one that came, that was
Yeah.
just like, oh my gosh, we
This
want
is
to do this, and we're willing to put the 100 in there,
Gives us that
it gives us that flexibility.
One challenge with that though is as an applicant, I'm gonna write you $100,000 project. And so
Every time.
every time.
Yeah.
And so there's a likelihood that you could get those, and then there's gonna be a lot of contract negotiation that you'd have to do for folks to whittle their project down. But the sense of what you're saying is like, if someone has a great idea, I do want to hear it, but you might be in the place of people pitching you something you're really excited about and then having to really nickel and dime it down to get into a budget range.
It's not necessarily analogous, but on the housing committee, we deal with that. Just gotta take a zero off the end. That's what I think is fun.
Yeah,
I
Moving
think
along.
that's fun.
Yeah, I think staff is used to
Yeah.
doing that kind of work in the contract negotiating, so.
So from the staff perspective, you'd be okay with
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Well, what do y'all think then? It sounds like, what's the bottom number? Where's a good,
Low end number?
Yeah.
yes, low number?
I think from a capacity standpoint, I don't think we should go much lower than, say, 30. As I'm thinking, could we do 3 projects in a year? That might really, and, you know, a lot of this is gonna fall on help from you guys to help us manage all of that. And so I don't know if that sounds reasonable for your shop.
I think so. Most of the grants that are coming out of strategic partnerships are within that range, I'll say. I mean, there is a flux, of course, but a nonprofit can typically get a project up and running with 30,000. It really just depends upon the requirements. Like if you are going to require construction drawings, that money's going to be gone as soon as you say that you need that requirement. So, but I think 30 feels safe, especially to your points of wanting to create some data points to help tell a story for the pilot to move forward for permanent funding.
Okay. So it sounds like, is everybody good with the 30,000 up to?
Yeah.
That?
We could also say something like, we would like to see 1 to 4 projects, just to see, because that's the other thing I'm gonna do as an applicant, is I'm gonna go, here's the pot size, how much of that can I get, and a signal that we wanna spread it around.
Yeah,
Might give them a strategic data point for them not all to just shoot the moon and us get 15 proposals for $100,000 each and then be kind of in a tough spot.
I would definitely recommend doing a disclaimer, like up to 100, but we're aiming for $30,000 projects.
Okay.
yeah, that's kind of thinking like a narrative explanation. Yeah, yeah, cool.
And those are questions you're gonna get once this is out anyhow, so.
Is there a cost on scale, so like a per unit cost? Is there an idea of the impact or scale of the project that wants to be implemented? Or is it $26,000 per acre to implement? Or like our stream project is 300-foot buffer off of a stream. So if I do the math, that came out to maybe $25,000 per acre on that project. And then if there's an idea of what that money would actually pull off, that would be helpful maybe. Otherwise, it's just throwing a number out there. Like it's 30,000, 100 linear feet at 50-foot buffer, or is it, or is 30 grand, 10 feet with a huge buffer and fencing and tanks?
So I think that's a little bit the challenge of this, the way this is designed, is it's really kind of open to what is water quality, what's a water quality improvement? It could be stormwater, you know, it could be some kind of fencing and buffer establishment, or it could be a whole stream bank restoration. So I think that's what's hard here. I think it's good. I'm not advocating shrinking the scope, but I think in terms of guessing on cost, I think that's kind of what makes this difficult.
Yeah. And maybe that's something we'll learn in
Exactly.
years to come, like what those measures could be. Standards. But yeah, it's standards, but we're not quite there yet, because right now it's so wide.
However, I do think the fact that we say that it needs to have an existing watershed management plan
That limits it
does
to
help
3.
guide us to the types of projects it's going to be.
Because I mean, there's probably about 3 of those in the county, right? And we'll list them. There's the Smith Creek one.
Yep, there's the Cane Creek
Creek.
is in the process of getting one, and then there's the one for French Broad, the like kind of downtown section.
So kind of geographically limits us, which is, we talked about this, there's a strategy of this one in general of like, do we do a little bit everywhere? Or do we have targeted watershed improvements, and so that function helps us with the targeting like we've talked about. It sounds smart.
And I think the other thing that we need to remember is that even if we get 3 projects going in the same watershed, we likely are not gonna monitor that and see some big change, especially if it's in like the French Broad, if the projects are along the French Broad. So we have to be reasonable in what we think our outcomes are going to be, and we have to trust the science that says all of these things contribute to improved water quality over time.
Right.
So when we think about in the grant piece, we think about what are our measurables and how do we have a successful outcome. And in here, the successful outcome may be completing to design and not having, water quality samples for the next 10 years to show some kind of improvement.
I've seen some grants where it says preference will be given to 2 or 3 larger projects, or, where there's wording like that to try to encourage that, put it out there. Then you still have your flexibility if you don't set a certain amount.
And let's look at that number 7 if we can, around the leveraging the funds. I just want to make sure we're on the same page with that. So we definitely expected leveraging of funds, and then I think you'd asked that question, are we counting in kind? So let's have that conversation around what that looks like. Are we saying that it's just other funding coming in, or can it be in kind as well? What are thoughts around that?
I think the main intent of this language, right, was to say you must be getting other funds from somewhere, just one other place. So I think that's a first suggestion, is just to word it like that. And then obviously if there are multiple partners, they need to disclose them in the application.
And so are you saying counting in kind or not? No, okay.
The only thing I'd say, and I don't have a strong opinion, but again, from running funds before, required match sets a threshold for who's gonna apply, obviously, right? And, small nonprofits who are, Hominy Creek Greenway, for example, like they are hustling right now to figure out how to be a board and how to fundraise. Like they're not gonna be sophisticated enough to have actual dollars in hand, and that's okay. But that sets a equity limitation on who could apply, and that's not a big deal. We just want folks who have a lot of experience, know how to nail this and knock it out. Then that gives us what we want.
Yeah.
But which is fine.
Yeah.
But it could come up in the conversation of it creates an exclusivity to access to public dollars, so it gets pretty philosophical pretty quickly. But I think in a pilot, just be aware that conversation might evolve over time and you might want to think differently, but if we just want to knock out some projects with some really trusted, experienced partners, then think the in-kind wouldn't be necessary.
Okay.
Mm.
I'm
And
good
on
with
that same thought
Yeah.
train, is the bottom line for number 7 just to show that there's partnership and collaboration? Like, what's the bottom line reasoning for including that?
Bigger projects?
Well, and
Just for bigger projects?
we tend to like leverage money, right? And just make sure that there's other funding coming in there.
Helps us tell our stories too for the fund of public tax dollars.
Yeah.
So do you, want to set a match if the match has to be a percentage of the total, or is it just you need to demonstrate some kind of funding?
I feel like if we say some kind of funding and then in our point ranking, there's the flexibility. That way we can be like, oh my gosh, you brought 75 match. Yeah, you get 15 points here. So it still keeps flexibility. Like, again, I've been the applicant and I've been the funder and I have like hustled 10 meetings to get my final 15 grand in to pull a match. And it's just like, it's a pretty high bar to jump through if we set the match arbitrarily.
Yeah.
If you think about, the clean water fund, land and water fund, or whatever they're calling it now, they don't set a match, but you get bonus. Yeah, the more match you bring, the more points you get. And so I think we see that. I don't think that's uncommon to think of it that way.
Yeah, and that is, like you said, that's within the criteria, the points that they get. And they get.
Yep.
Those were the two main questions that I had, but clearly if you all have, if there's other points there within it from committee or staff, something that was a red flag for you that you're like, oops, let's address this. Speak up.
Well, I guess I'll just offer that because of the short timeline, that likely once we get this request for proposals pulled together and get it out there, it's likely gonna need to be a fairly shovel-ready project.
Yeah.
And so I guess I'm just cautioning that as we look to potentially do this into the future, this might not be the absolute ideal demonstration of the types of projects that we can do going forward.
Sure.
Ideally, we get on the same schedule that strategic partnerships.
Yeah.
Where they do it before the budget, and then they have a full fiscal year to.
I'm not sure the timeline will be included in all this.
Yes.
Yeah.
And do we have a pulse? I just don't know this industry, like, do we expect from the relationships we have that we'll get 25 applicants, great projects? Do we, like, in the nonprofit world, is there, like, if I think of the energy world, we have like maybe 5 nonprofits that would play and not all of them would be strong. Are we still looking at kind of a small circle?
I think given the time frame and given the fact that it has to be within a watershed plan, I think that really shrinks down, but
Yeah, the
Well, we
plan
feel
there is
like-
that
Yeah, someone will be able to pull this off. We aren't setting the bar too high.
Or,
Ask us in September.
I feel really confident. The only thing that gives me pause is just the timeline. I think in terms of what we're outlining and the work that we're trying to do, we absolutely have partners that will be interested in this. It's just a question of what they can reasonably do in the amount of time that we have.
And do they like, are they anticipating this? Have we already been in conversation to like do
We've
business
reached out
development
to
with
the
them?
state, to
Yeah.
Tim Fox, who is involved in the watershed plan, so he's aware, that that's happening.
I've mentioned it, but like without knowing all the parameters, I've kind of said, hey, there's money in the budget. We're working through those details. So I don't think anybody's currently preparing.
and I guess somebody mentioned, I think Samantha mentioned the construction.
Yeah.
What was that part? The construction drawings.
Mhm.
That, I mean, is that realistic? Is that, yeah, let's look at that number 8 there, because I just kind of was trying to think of like everything that we would want,
Mhm.
right? Does that all sound reasonable what I put in there?
Are the construction drawings too high of a bar?
Well,
That's
your,
a question.
your number 6,
Number 8.
pathway to permits is gonna require at least a 50% drawing to get your permits.
Okay.
So, I don't think, I think the question here is, if you've already invested that much, do you have the money you need to get this project moving forward? If you haven't solidified all your funding, I'm not sure that you make it that far. And if this is the piece that gets you there, I'm worried that the permits and the work won't be able to be completed in a truncated timeline. I'll give an example. We had an EWP project out towards Barnardsville, and it took us, for a myriad of reasons, COVID being one of them, it took us 2.5 years to get the funding in place. The project was finished in 4 days. But to get the funding and the permits, because we needed no rise and we needed all this stuff, it was 2.5 years. Getting the work done is often, and Chris, I mean, I don't know your experience, but the work side is often the easiest piece. It's all the steps that get you to the work. Yeah. So I think
So
with this timeline, we need that.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
so
I just wanted, okay,
I
okay.
have a question.
Oh, Brownie's.
Go ahead, Brownie.
So, yeah, it does, since this is new, I mean, it does seem like we're making this like, well, I guess, could someone reiterate why it has to be done in 1 year? Because that does seem like a real problem for a lot of good projects. I mean, if we impose that same standard on ourselves as government, like we would never do anything. So why are we making other people do it that way?
It's just that this currently isn't in a multi-year fund.
Yeah.
It's in the general
Yeah,
fund.
it's just because it was adopted as part of the fiscal year. There are ways around it, and we just need to talk to budget and finance about, what we can do to continue it. So if you all feel strongly that that's detrimental to, the idea, then, we can change that, but.
I think we should change that. I do think we will scare away a lot of otherwise really good projects because people will be concerned that it can't get completed in that time frame, and so they won't try for it. So I would advocate for that, and I would also advocate for greater flexibility in the use of funds, like on item number 8. I mean, it may be that they need to spend the money to do a site plan or do construction drawings. And that may be like really like the valuable, where our funds could be very valuable to basically like develop a really good plan for a high priority project that's identified in one of the watershed plans. So I don't think we should make those things a requirement. In fact, I think they should be an eligible use of funds.
The only downside with that, Brownie, is we just won't have as much to show from the pilot. And again, if we were a nonprofit raising funds from philanthropy, that would be a real problem, right? Because we need to show what a success.
So we're
But
not,
this
we're it's government
Exactly.
funding. I mean, if somebody comes in, I think these should all be things that like are incentivized. If somebody comes in and we're like, we have a shovel ready plan and we just need $30,000 to literally go build this thing and we can do it in 6 months. Obviously, and it's a high impact project, that would be the thing we would fund compared to somebody else who comes in and just wants to do some planning work. But I just, I guess I'm just concerned that if we make the criteria too stringent and we've never done this before, are we actually going to get enough really excellent projects in the door? And I just, if we do it for a year or two and we find out there's tons of shovel-ready projects that just need the funding to literally pay a contractor to go do it, then I think we could tighten it up. But I don't know, at this point, I'm just a little concerned about making it so stringent that we may not get enough really great projects in the door. So that's the concern. But we'll learn more once we do it once for sure.
Now, with that, like number 4, we said must implement best management improvements, right? Not testing and studies. And so I do want to we're still holding to that, right? This isn't about testing and studies.
We're actually water quality, testing and studies, not engineering studies.
I'm sorry, say it again.
You're talking about water quality
Right.
studies and testing,
Right.
not what he's talking about,
Right.
when he's saying engineering.
Yeah.
Okay,
I just wanted to make sure,
let me clarify that.
yes.
I can speak to that just a little bit in that in the money that soil and water gets, generally, engineering is sorely inadequate. And so there is a need for money for engineering, especially if you're working in a floodplain and you need to do a no-rise study. In fact, that was one of the pieces, while we got millions of dollars to do EWP work, we were limited in the engineering money that we had, and they make it two separate buckets. And we had to go out and raise more money from the state in order to get our projects moving. And so I think it is a true need and a roadblock for some of these projects to get off the ground. Again, it depends on where you're working and the type of project it is, how much that plays into it.
So we're gonna remove the word construction drawings from number 8 and make that eligible. That's my consensus on that.
I think you can have a site plan, which is, here's what we're expecting to do without construction, without the engineered side of it.
I'm now worried that the language at the end of number 4 is too vague.
So maybe add water quality testing and studies not available to make sure that there's no confusion there.
Let's just start with what our original intent was. Was our original intent to exclude just testing related studies, or was it also to exclude any sort of plan / study?
Or like, we don't want to fund a watershed management plan.
Right, we were about actually helping them do the improvements.
Right.
Okay.
So I think you can make it.
Right, no
Your
pre-planning is what I'm kind of hearing. I'll make the words better,
Okay.
but yeah, okay. And then back to the timeline, so if we are gonna extend from beyond the fiscal year, what is that acceptable timeframe? 12 months?
From you're saying from the time that we award the grant?
Yeah,
Okay.
when would y'all wanna see the final projects?
What's realistic, 12 months from the time we award it?
And depending on where it is in the pipeline, it can take a couple of months to get through the permitting process, depending on if you need to do no-rise and you need floodplain permits. That can take several months.
Can we expedite permitting for these grantees?
Well, some of it is in-house, some of
That'd be
it's Buncombe
pretty
County,
big.
and some of it's Army Corps, and, yeah.
Not our.
Overlapping
We get a
stuff.
lot
Some
of
of them are
roles.
not ours. And we just have a new floodplain administrator, so, and I think she's getting her feet under her. Our project contracts are 3 years. I realize we're not working within that time frame, but that's what ours are. I think if we think about this, what's reasonable to get this released? When do we think we're gonna put it out? And then how long do we need to leave it out there to call in applications?
Well, I feel at the point that this is right now, it's gonna take at least a month to get it stitched up in a final version. I'm not sure, I'm just walking into
Yeah.
this, so I don't have a really stable foundation in front of me. But then, once you have your final version in front of you, you advertise the RFP for typically 2 weeks to a month. It really depends upon what kind of RFP and how detailed the questions are that you're trying to get answers to. So anywhere from 2 weeks to a month. I would lean more on a month if you're having to have drawings submitted, in case people don't quite have those on hand yet.
So you're looking at decision.
And then it takes a month to like rally the review committee. So what are we at? That's already 3 months, right? Before you can even start to negotiate contracts.
So January 1 might be the realistic start time in the world.
And so if that's the case, maybe the consideration is, 18 months, like finish this fiscal year and they have next fiscal year to be finished. The other thing we have trout moratoriums, and we have like some things that would preclude you from working for X number of months in a watershed. So I think 18 months would be more reasonable than 12. But then again, you never know. I mean, if you give us a short timeline, maybe you can get the work done. I mean, it's kind of hard to say without knowing what these projects really are. Not everything needs a ton of engineering.
Yeah.
So,
Well, maybe we go with the 18 months, right? Yeah, I go with the 18 months.
And then informally, when the review is happening, you're gonna get to splitting hairs, even if you have a really tight criteria list, because they're just gonna be very different. And one might just present itself with a timeline that's really attractive, and that might tip it over.
and does that work for
Budget.
potentially funding this again if we have nothing to show at the end of this year? Or we have, what we can report is the projects that we have and the work that, we can present.
Yeah, you do 12 months, it'll be January, and that's right when you're in the thick of budget discussions, and so you would kind of know. But I mean, you would know based on the applicants what the demand is, which is also something.
And we'd be
That would be
able
good to
to,
know.
and we'd be able to speak to the projects that we
Yeah.
selected.
Yeah.
Right, and we could speak to the expected impact of those projects because
We're gonna just want that done.
Yeah.
The commissioners have been setting the goal structure, setting the strategy, like, this isn't, y'all have a lot of commitment already, so.
Any other? Thank you all.
Good.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So do you need anything else from me, Sybil, or you're good now with this and this discussion?
Yeah, I think we're good. I do want to clarify one thing. So in our minds, what we typically do for grants is when we work all these details out, we get the applications, staff kind of reviews them, and then we bring them to this group to kind of make the final recommendation. But we would kind of do the scoring and all that and then present to y'all. Y'all can choose whichever ones you want. You don't have to pick the ones that score the highest. But I just want to clarify if that's what you're thinking. And then once those are selected, we would go to the full board for approval.
Okay, so this staff would go ahead and kind of do a pre-score,
Yes.
and then you bring it to us with those scores. We'd be able to review, look at all that, and then make the final decisions.
Yeah.
Works for me. That's all good.
And we would be pulling in staff from planning, some of the stormwater folks and erosion control, and other folks have more expertise.
Well, I do always appreciate notes and things like that. When we were doing the ARPA funds, that I always appreciate the notes that staff make about certain projects. Because beyond the score, actually the notes is what was really useful, like why you thought something.
So I think we kind of got enough information to take a stab at, I shared this with Commissioner Wells and Commissioner Sloan, the template that Strategic Partnership uses for their granting program. And so we're basically going to steal this template, throw the information that we talked about today into this, and we'll bring this back to you all at your next meeting. And then if you all approve at that meeting, then we'll go forward with something that her team trying to help us with the technical piece and get it worked out. So.
Sounds good.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Moving right along. Green Bank pilot.
Is that still on there? I didn't think you guys were interested in that.
I feel like it was a week ago that there was a big press conference that the Feds put on.
Yeah.
That's right, last
Green Bay
week in
funding.
Baltimore, I think.
Yeah.
Well, so that particular event was about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund.
Yeah.
And all the funds that could be coming down, that the Clean Energy Fund, Smart John is gonna be applying for.
Right.
That could be a year, maybe more, before they actually even see those dollars if they're approved for that fund. So my update is more about what we're doing.
Yeah.
And the commitments that we've made and where we're going with that. In fact, I was in Charlotte all day yesterday for the All America is All In tour that the Biden administration is doing, and it was cash in on clean energy. And I picked up Jen Weiss at the train station in advance so that we could chat for an hour or two before we got going on that, so that I could have as much up-to-date information on where we stand with the remake stuff before today. So obviously, we've approved the funding, we got the $100,000 at this point. Sort of next step for us are to initiate that contract with the Clean Energy Fund to start this loan loss reserve. It's a bit of a new animal for us, so we're stealing some language from some of the Clean Energy Fund work done in Colorado to set up loan loss reserves. So that's kind of like first step for me, is getting that contract in place and working with those folks to, you know, just sort of set this agreement up. There are a couple of key pieces we're working on with them to get things moving. First of which is essentially identifying and setting up the portal for contractor registration. There have been talk about using this platform called Smart E. We may or may not still do that. Smart E has sort of seen the big pie that's coming and decided that they don't want to work on small pilots. They just want to do statewide program or nothing. And we're not at a place where we're ready to roll out a statewide program. So we're working on whatever that back end solution will potentially be to, and basically what that is it's a contractor registration and it tracks the initiation and follow through of projects as they're put into the queue. So that back end system is really important for, again, just creating a platform through which contractors can register projects, and then we can follow the progress of those projects and make sure that at each point we're making sure the work's getting done and that they're running through the queue. So we're working on setting that up. The other part of it is and this is entirely honestly on Jen and her team, to find those capital partners with which to use that $100,000 to create the fund.
Do they have any leads?
They do, and that's, you know, they were in town a couple of weeks ago meeting with all the CDFIs that are in town, as well as Bank of America and a few others. They feel like they have one partner for sure, but it's not their preferred partner. It's a Florida fund. So they're, you know, I think they're trying to sort of cast a wide net. Their preferred partner, I think, is Self-Help. Right, and since Melissa Malcolm Weber worked with Self-Help for a number of years as their sustainability director, they're hoping that relationship can get Self-Help on board. They haven't expressed a huge interest as of yet, right? So they're still working on building that relationship, I think. But that's where things are right this minute. Creating that portal and getting that back end system set up, and then setting up the actual loan loss reserve with a traditional lender of some kind is sort of priority one for us. In parallel, staff at the county is working to make sure that there's going to be a queue of projects. At the end of the day, that's if we create a wonderful lending product that is available for our residents, but there are no projects, that's a nuisance for us. So we're working with, and actually we have a meeting later today with Solar Crowdsource. So Solar Crowdsource submitted a proposal to us so Solar Crowdsource, for those of you who don't know, ran the Solarize campaign we did about a year and a half ago, I guess, at this point. And it was a very successful campaign that's been, it's kind of done exactly what we hope, is that it's spread to other communities in North Carolina, and it's being done really successfully. So we'd like to take their Solarize model, well, it's not perfect for this type of thing, but we'd like to sort of modify that Solarize campaign model to other technologies. And we're thinking specifically about heat pumps probably. And, again, without getting into the weeds about what a Solarize model is, it's sort of a bulk purchasing campaign. And again, that's not apples to apples with heat pumps and solar. So there's a lot to tweak and modify, and that's part of what we're going to be discussing later this afternoon. how do we do that? But the vision is kind of the same, to create this community campaign, to work with local contractors, to set up this network, to provide education for both the contractors themselves, as well as residents about electrification and these new technologies, and to get people to sign up to do these projects. Full disclosure, I'm still wrestling in my mind with like, what does success look like? Like, how many projects are we built on? We're talking about a residential heat pump program, which is kind of what they're doing. 50 projects, 100 projects. I mean, it's hard to kind of put a number on that in my brain right this
And I think there'll be a really big difference between the number of projects that come through the campaign and the number of projects that want financing. Because I think that like, we're gonna get a lot of projects where people are just showing up with cash.
Absolutely.
And that'll be great. And
Absolutely.
we wanna make sure the fund is leveraged too. So I mean, part of what we're doing is really doing market innovation research right now.
Absolutely.
And I think that's great. That's a good role for government to help stimulate markets.
Yeah, so part of this initial process will be, in my head, we gotta get the contractor side of it right. So we've got a lot of local HVAC contractors, and that's great. Not all of them are gonna be interested in this, and that's okay. Some of them are throwing business away at this point, they're so busy. Yeah. But we do have some networks that we've already sort of tapped into, one of which is our utility has a trade ally network that's essentially, that made a lot of sense to me to reach out to them first, because Duke already has this network of contractors who do this exact work and are already sort of trained up on leveraging utility rebates and things of that nature, which I think layer in with IRA incentives and tax incentives, ITC, all of this great stuff. We want to leverage as much of that as possible, right? We want to bring the cost down as much as possible, which means there are going to be some people that can just cut a check, for sure. But there will still be those that need to finance and want to have that option as well. In addition, where I think there could be some, I don't want to speak too much into this, you'll probably get mad at me. But, we dedicated some ARPA funding, both the city and the county, to specifically doing like HVAC replacement. And I think that there's the potential there. We can, again, just make sure these relationships are established, that as we get residents potentially that can afford it, whether they're, asking a low income family to take on debt of any kind, even if it's very good interest rate, that's an asset I don't feel great about regardless. But if we have some funding that we've already given to some of our community partners to do HVAC replacements, that's a pipeline to get them some work too, and potentially subsidize fully, maybe a handful of these projects. I don't know, I'm dreaming at that point, right? Like I want to see that happen. But it's one more component, right, that makes everything complicated. But we're very excited about that as a possibility for sure. Because like with Solar Eyes, it was great, but when they came to me and pitched it to me initially, I said, that's awesome. What are we going to do for the people who can't afford it regardless, right? Because it's still a premium product, one way or the other. So there's a lot on the table right now that we're trying to sort of sort through, relationships we're trying to build, networks we're trying to tap into. I could probably sit here and talk about this all day, but that's.
Well, it's good. We
I
can
wanna
use
stop.
all the time on the
Yeah,
water.
we have lots of time. We have lots of time.
So Jeremiah, I love the idea of an annual heat pumperized, that's not a word. Pumperized program, but yeah. Maybe that's the.
We just need some deep fakes of Arnold Schwarzenegger advertising this program.
Just keep up on his spice out.
But the financing component through a bank could be turnkey, that like any HVAC contractor can still use it. Even if we pick one that's just for the.
Absolutely, yeah, that's absolutely true. You could register, any contractor could potentially register to leverage that financing mechanism.
So there's a registration program.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the idea.
Okay.
That's the idea. Again, we haven't set that up yet.
Yeah.
We're only like 3 weeks into
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
But that is the idea. Any
Okay.
contractor could register
Okay.
this.
So I'm thinking about the mail I get all the time that says like, as you ask you to sign up for a credit card, like 0% 14-month financing, which is
Exactly.
not as good at whatever they're gonna come up with.
Yeah, it's interesting because.
I'm sure that contractors don't necessarily wanna offer that to people, but that's what they
so
got.
with most of these contractors, there's typically a couple of different companies that they work with that they're not always happy with. They sort of pay in to have an option
To have the product.
to have that product so that they can say, hey, we've got a financing option for you if you can't afford to pay for it. So this would be another option for them.
Yeah.
Preferably, hopefully a better one that they could use. We did hear from the Duke Energy Trade Ally, the residential Trade Ally manager, that he has been approached on a number of occasions by contractors saying, we want the utility to provide some kind of better financing option.
Yeah,
So financing is something we're at least hearing is like, there's
yeah,
an appetite for.
yeah.
It really just like fortifies the business development funnel for these companies.
Yeah.
Because if you're going out there and selling this product on my front door, you want to make the deal, and this gives you another chip to sell your product.
That's right, that's right. So our hope is that financing mechanism, again, available to anybody that wants to sign up for it. We would go through a process where we would select probably not just one, but probably two, maybe three contractors to do the work for the campaign, the people to sign up for the campaign. I can't imagine trying to do it with just one. That's probably too much. In Solarize, you do just the one. It's easier that way. So
Yeah.
again, these are the sort of like the minutia of like making that Solarize model into an electrification model. We're calling it more of a heat pumperized, but
Yeah.
like we're calling it sort of like electrified.
Decarbonized.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
Part of what's really different with Solarize is like a major part of what uses government money to stimulate the economy is bulk purchasing. And so you just buy down the cost of the product in general.
that's right.
It seems unlikely that type of market intervention will work here because my heat pump is gonna be different than your heat pump, it's gonna be different than your heat pump and their sizes and then all the components. So it's not a product out of a line, so we won't see cost reduction to sell this further. So what it'll turn into is like a community rah campaign with buzz that has government leadership. And so it just like, it's like a massive marketing campaign and then it's like, hey, we have a financing tool that's attractive. So I think that we'll see really different types of results than Solarize because Solarize just came out with like a huge sale essentially. It just made the product cheaper. And I don't think that will happen here. It'll be more about like mass marketing and a financing product, but that's a major difference to the design.
100%. I couldn't agree more. We've talked a lot about the technology itself and the fact that what makes it so different in my mind is that a solar developer can give you a cost estimate without ever even going to your house, right? They can do it on Google Earth and they can tell you, this is what we do for your home, send us your electric bills and we'll give you everything you need. That's not how this works. They gotta get in your house. They gotta,
Yeah.
And to design it.
and there's a level of, uncertainty and trust to allow us to do that. Residents have to be okay with us saying like, hey, we're gonna come to your house. We're gonna send somebody you've never met to go look in your basement. The technology itself is different from home to home. The size of the unit needs to be different from home to home. Is it ducted? Are we including potentially like ductless mini splits as an option for this? I mean, there's a lot to work through to make this successful. And I've said, Jackie's probably really sick of hearing this. I've said a million times, we're gonna probably stub our toe trying to figure this out because it's complex. But I'm super excited about trying anyway.
It makes me think what Jen said earlier of like, we just need to be realistic about what outcomes we're expecting.
Yes.
And similar, like we're not gonna see water quality dramatically change. We probably won't see nearly as many people sign up as we did in Solarize, but the success is like innovating on a market intervention that can then spread. Like this is really tip of the spear work nationally, and it's pretty exciting that we're a part of it.
Yeah, and educating the public and converting, I think what success is. I think it's converting homes from the ancient technology they're on now to.
Yeah.
And that is, in that scenario, it's harder, takes more time, is more expensive. Maybe it requires financing, that's the whole point.
Yeah.
So I can think of two people that I wish a program existed for today. One, West Asheville couple, they're both teachers at ACS, they have heating oil and an AC unit. And their heat died just received because their oil congealed because it was like 0 degrees.
Yeah.
And like that home probably needs an electrical panel upgrade and like various electrical work just to like install any sort of heat pump.
Right.
And so like that would be a success story. There's probably like 8 other homes in West Asheville on that street.
That's right.
And I know an elderly retired woman who has lived in her same house since like the 60s in West Asheville, who had a gas furnace, whose gas furnace broke, and she called up the only person she's ever talked to about her furnace ever, which is the gas company. And they sold her another one for cheap because they're like a cigarette company, like they gave away their technology to keep people hooked on their poison. So like she could have, like, that is an opportunity to like educate her on like there's funding, there's other options, there's other choices.
And that points to another thing that's really different for us setting expectations here. People don't typically pursue this product on a sunny day when everything's going great. They do it when
That's right.
it breaks.
Yep.
Right,
They want it
so,
now. Yeah.
so with Solarize, we could drum up all the interest we wanted, and people could save their pennies and be like, oh, this spring I'm gonna do it, and it's a planned product.
Yeah.
Whereas like, I don't know, can we time it when it's gonna be a really cold winter and then we'll get more demand? I mean, quite frankly, we should probably time it to come out in the winter, I don't know, like not a summer product, but like something, like there's so much difference here.
Yes.
Which is, again, why it's so important for government to step in and create some safety nets for this market to like get started and figure itself out in scale.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We are trying to time this, we've got a winter rollout.
Yes.
Because again, I think you make a great point that people don't think about their heat pump until it stops working. Or until it's time to cut that pretty expensive check, oil gets filled up.
Yeah.
You know, that's when you start thinking about these things. And that's when we, late fall, early winter.
Do we think we'll be ready for that for this winter?
I'm not gonna answer that question.
I think it's,
No, I'm just
I
kidding.
mean, really rolling this out in June could be a really missed opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. No, that's not the plan. The plan is to spend the next few months ironing out some of this stuff, right? Because there's a lot of I's and T's here to figure out. So that come, hopefully December, January, like there's a campaign to be launched, right? And there's contractors on board, and there's a back-end marketplace that we created to help, when projects do start to queue up, to get these things done. But boy, I'm like super excited and super freaked out at the same time about how all of this could pan out over several months. But it's there's so many lessons to be learned over the next few months. I think that it's so worth it to try this. And when we decided to sort of work with Solarize, the solar panel switch folks, it was less about again the technology and the model in that way, and more about the community campaigning, outreach, and education to residents and that sort of thing. And they've got a lot of experience with that sort of thing. Plus, frankly, 2/3 of their, it's like 3/4 of their workforce lives. So that doesn't hurt as well. So they are mostly local residents. So we feel good about the decision to work with them on this. And of course, partner with our other local CBOs on this as well. Again, with folks that we've already given funding to do some of this type of work, and hopefully mesh those things together. So I don't know. Again, I feel like I could just keep going on this, but I'll stop.
I would just like to add that some of the EPA messaging that they're putting out about electrification and promoting any more efficient heat pumps, they are focusing on summertime and air conditioning and trying to make a point that, like, say, if you have an oil furnace and you don't even have air conditioning, hey, get a heat pump, and then you automatically got.
You got both.
Now you got both. That's what we did.
Yeah.
That's part of it. And I think with some of the CPR, the climate pollution reduction funds that are going to be coming out in the implementation phase, that could be a possible opportunity. And I know that we're kind of exploring, talking to the state as part of their plan about the possibility of trying to get a grant through our agency to maybe replace some older wood stoves with some heat pumps, mini splits, things of that nature. And so definitely interested in making sure that that's in the state's CPR plan, so that if we wanted to apply when that funding comes out next year.
Is that state money?
It will be going to the states. All the states are getting money as part of that from EPA.
Okay.
And so the key thing is that when the state comes out with their plan next year for climate pollution reduction, whatever projects are in the implementation phase need to be included in that. So we're trying to, work with the state to put in some, see what they're thinking. They're just really getting started. I think that their plan is due early next year, so.
Cool.
Could be a potential source of.
Lots of money. I'm starting to lose track.
Yeah, I totally agree. Spent all day yesterday.
You guys gotta make us a Gantt chart or something.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we did.
Just to like, yeah,
Some of the Q and A's yesterday left me more confused.
okay,
You
yeah,
know, it's
yeah.
like, okay, that didn't help at all. But we're getting there, again, some of these are in open comment period. Some of the guidance is in open comment period. To, sort of say, hey, you get more clarity on this. This funding sounds great, but I'm not sure that it works for us or not, or I'm not sure what's gonna qualify and what's not, and I don't, it was a lot. My brain was swimming yesterday, but it was worth it, it was fun, it's a good trip.
Jeremiah, could you share a little bit, this has been coming up with kind of city relationships about the solar crowdsourced choice, and what that kind of implied for the alliance, not to
Sure.
get into drama, but just as a heads up, some of the local relationships are shifting. So it just might be good to understand that.
Yeah, and that's.
Tell us more.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, at the end of the day, the pot of funding we have to do all this work is the same, right? And so if we want to do field work, it means that we're going to have to shift resources around. And so in order to contract for solar crowdsource as a part of the overall sort of scope of community work we're trying to do, we had to reduce the amount of funding we're giving to Greenfield Alliance, and they are a part of it is a lot of weatherization work. And essentially, part of that decision-making process was, number one, solar crowdsource had a good proposal. And Greenfield Alliance proposal really didn't get into, even though it was in the RFP, really did not get into the campaign and the deliverables that we've just spent the last 20 minutes talking about.
Oh,
So they had an opportunity to address it, and their proposal really did. They mentioned like potentially doing a heat pump hot water heater idea, but it wasn't flushed out at all. It just said, it literally was just that, hey, we could potentially do a heat pump hot water heater thing.
yeah.
But without any details or any real, sort of thought that went into that. I will say that one of the reasons we didn't like that particular idea is that the feedback we've gotten from the financing side of it is that heat pump hot water heaters are cheap compared to some of this other technology and won't need financing. And so it wouldn't really mesh well with what we're trying to do with the green. And, so the other side of that was, any funding we've got to shift over to solar crowdsource to work on this heat pump campaign means less money that's going towards the weatherization. And so part of that decision also though was that they have received $500,000 in normal funding for other types of work and retrofits, and they've done great in building up capacity in that way. So given that they've gotten $500,000 in other funding, you said, our priority honestly is they're starting to shift because these opportunities are presenting themselves and they're unprecedented. And we want to take advantage of them. And so we did reduce the amount of funding that the city and the county combined are giving to Greenfield Alliance for the weatherization work. And of course, that's a tough book to swallow.
Just so we know how much, what was the reduction?
About half, it was about a 50% reduction. It was 45 or 48% something like that. So closer to weatherizing about 100 homes a year, give or take, as opposed to 200 homes a year. But I'll lean on the fact that I honestly think the work that we're shifting into has the potential to be significantly impactful. And at the end of the day, that's the highest priority for us. It's the most impactful work we can do. We have been doing weatherization for a number of years. They've gotten over $1 million from us. And we have told them, like we tell everybody, frankly, every year, you can't just rely on us every year. Like, you've got to start building capacity in other places so that government funding can be a fit thing. So
I'll just add, I personally I was overlapping at professional retreats with the ED of the Greenbelt Alliance, where like 6 business days where I like sat next to him at meals, we carpooled to Atlanta. And so the opportunity to seize this day was extremely explicit. And then ultimately in their proposal, they put like $10,000 to this program and it wasn't fleshed out. So I feel like they had significant opportunity. But I've like since talked to their ED, I've talked to several of their board members, I've talked to several of their staff that they're experiencing this as a surprise, which I find really actually shocking that it caught them off guard. Because I do feel like there has been significant signals that we wanted to see some innovation. But just in case you're hearing stuff in the community, it's good to be aware of. And I really support staff's direction. I think we need to pursue impact. And I think this is a better bet than where that happened.
And Greenbelt will be able to modify their budget with the ARPA funding to help make up some of that loss. So they should be okay in terms of meeting their bottom line requirements for the weatherization project. We're just pending them coming back to us with that budget modification request in writing.
So they'll have run room if they ultimately don't come up with another funding source. They'll still have a good chunk of time to not have to like lay people off, which is, I didn't know that. That's very good.
I would say, I'm just gonna give you my opinion on this. So whatever choices are made with what happens with their ARPA funding has nothing to do with me, I don't know that contract. But I would say that like any funding that potentially shifts away from the funding that they have for HVAC replacement.
It's about impact.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
about impact.
So I'm not hugely supportive of changing the scope of the contract that they currently have for their ARPA funding. I think the board said, we're gonna give you money for HVAC.
Yeah,
We
we
should give
should,
HVAC.
we decided
Agree.
to read through all that with a fine tooth comb and pick the things we.
Right.
And so the stickler or the point of where they're pulling that budget modification request out of is they have steps in place before they get to the HVAC replacement. Because at first I am like definitely on the same page with all of you here. Like even just the project description is specifically about the HVAC replacements and the impact that's gonna have on the community. But in order for them to get to the HVAC replacement, their step 1 is weatherization of that household. So that's kind of where they're coming from is we can't do the HVAC replacement unless we do weatherization. So since we don't have the funding for weatherization anymore, or at least not the whole part of it, can we modify the budget so we can keep doing the weatherization, get the house ready for the HVAC replacement? So that's kind of where they're angling it.
And to be honest, like, they had such an opportunity
To
to
say,
say,
we built this weatherization foundation, here is how we're gonna use this next contract period to land the HVAC products. And, so I think y'all are handling this very well. And thanks for.
Well, we'll see what
filling
the request is too. I don't know.
I haven't even,
Yeah,
they
we
said they
haven't
would get it
received
to me
it.
this week.
We'll
It's
see.
Friday, I haven't heard from them, so.
We'll see what it is and go from there.
I'd love to see them hold off on their request until we get them in the proposal outsource and we all can talk together about how we can all be part of this program.
It does feel a bit panicky,
Yeah.
right? Like it's a panic move. We lost money, we gotta backfill it.
Mhm.
I do think
Instead of
that.
doing fundraising
I
elsewhere.
do
Yeah.
think, well, just hitting the pause button for a second and saying, okay, well, where is the opportunity? Right, because I do think there is one.
I don't know how the writing on the wall could have been written more clearly.
I could have just shouted it with a bullhorn, but it's
Growing pains.
fine. I think there's amazing things happening right now, and I'm super excited about them, and,
Yeah.
I think this, again, was a bit inevitable, but I think we're still going in a good direction, and we still got really exciting work ahead of us, so. But that's just me, I like to be optimistic. I'm happy to continue to ask, and we got lots of time still, so.
I think I have just one question, kind of go back to the beginning.
Yeah.
I know it's all being fleshed out and the feds are just making everyone more confused, but so our pilot, with Jennifer's group, have you heard more from her in terms of like how they're doing this across the state in terms of the pilots? Like, is our fund just gonna be local, or is it gonna be kind of a hidden partnership with other counties and cities, or
No,
how does that kind of?
we are, I mean, honestly, we're the only ones that are doing anything, right?
We are.
We're
the
it.
We are the pilots, so they
Okay,
are
I just
trying.
assumed she was shaking other people down for money.
She is,
Okay.
So it might
no one
come
has
on
made,
Okay. Okay,
yeah, no
cool.
one has made the commitment.
Okay,
So when I met with them a couple weeks ago, I said in no uncertain terms, like, listen, I know you want to do 2, 3, 4 pilots across the state. And I think that their idea in general was that each of those pilots should be a little bit different. So like, here, we're gonna focus on heat pumps, maybe in another community they would focus on solar, maybe. But I said, we're the only ones that have like committed any money. So I just want to know that we are your top priority. Right?
Yeah.
There you
Like
go.
that, you know, when we call, we get, you know, you answer the call. It's like, we are the only ones who have committed any funding to this. And we need to make this work. So, and again, full disclosure, I've known Jen for years. And so, like, you know,
Yeah.
I have a lot of confidence in her and her group to help us pull this off.
Yeah.
But there isn't any other community in North Carolina to date that has made a funding commitment to do it. So we're the only game in town right now, which, you know, could be good. Could be not as good, but we'll see, right? Yeah, so there's no other community that's committing to it, but they are in conversations for sure. So, but given that the budget
Well,
just
good for
happened,
us
all
for
of
being
us,
willing to be the first. Go out there.
I chalk that up entirely to this group, honestly, for making that commitment. 45 minutes.
I think that's
Air
it.
quality.
Yeah, it looks better out there than it did a
It's
few
been a
days
little
ago.
rough lately, Ashley. What are you gonna do about that?
Yes, we've been working hard.
Hey, everybody. This is Meg. I just wanted to make sure y'all knew that I've been on the call for about the past 15 minutes. Good to see y'all, or good to hear y'all.
Hey, man.
Good to hear you.
So I just wanted to give you guys an update on the wildfire smoke from Canada. We've had, as you know, we've had several forecasted code orange air quality days, and also a couple this week where we were actually code orange and over the standard for 24 hours. And so we've been getting a lot of questions. We did an interview with WLMS, I guess, a month or so ago, but it does appear that this is going to be happening a lot more frequently, unfortunately. They're predicting that the fires are going to burn all summer. And so we have done some outreach and worked with our local partners about our messaging. And I put a couple of items on the, Jackie uploaded to the website if you're interested in checking them out. We've met with CAPE and with Emergency Services and Department of Health and Human Services and Safety and Legal about, and discussed, messaging, particularly one of those things that comes up that touches all those departments is, what do we do if the air quality is code orange or even code red, and questions about N95 respirators have come up. So I'm really pleased that we were able to all get on the same page. And I do have EPA fact sheet 2-pager on the website if anybody wants to check it out. And DHHS and safety and everyone is really on board with the messaging that EPA is using there. As far as we want to encourage people that if air quality is code orange or red and, stay inside, limit your exposure. We don't want to encourage people to wear N95 masks unless they just really need to be outside for a long period of time. Check with your doctor. If you have certain health conditions, it might not be a good idea. So also put on the website the news item that we've been using. Kate has created a toolkit that we can use so that we can push these things out. Also, code orange and above forecast triggers have been burning a lot in Buncombe County, so we now have a banner on the website, and Fire Marshal is helping us with the messaging there. So, back in 2016, when we had fires in Western North Carolina and Tennessee, we got, we had several code red days actually. which we really weren't prepared for. And we've learned a lot since then and got some new tools in place. And now we've got low-cost air sensors that the public has out there that are actually supplementing our regulatory monitor data. So just wanted to let you guys know that we are here and working on the messaging, and we'll be ready, if the time comes, if we need to be available to do that. So
Have we had any code red this summer? I've seen it.
no, we have had code orange, I think, just this week.
We've had several
You know,
code orange.
It's kind of confusing because with the weather, it's like weather forecasting. When they forecast rain and we don't get rain, we know. But when they forecast, like say code orange, and it's hazy, we might not know if we don't check the actual conditions that in fact there were several days where we were just top end of yellow. So that's one thing that's a little confusing.
Have we been seeing anything from like the hospitals, or like, are we seeing any health impact or reporting of this triggering real medical challenges in the community?
So far, no, not that I'm aware of. I think that since we're kind of on the lower end, if you look at how far away these fires are, we're kind of the far end of where the impacts are being seen. I'm hoping that it won't get worse than what it has been. But with climate change, of course, we're expecting more and more of these fires and events. And so we think this is just going to be something that we have to be prepared to deal with. When we had the fires back in 2016, we participated in a joint incident command, a JIC, that was set up I think it was set up by the Forest Service and the State Division of Air Quality and our agency and DOT, and others were all involved in that, all the human services. So hopefully we won't see anything like that, but we do have a local professor that we're working with that's got purple air sensors he's putting out, and those are, EPA started putting the low cost sensor data on, especially with the wildfires in California, which has been helpful because, we only have so many regulatory monitors and sometimes the local conditions will be worse. So we've been telling people, hey, if you look and and it's showing code yellow on our monitor at Buckingham County Board of Ed, but you can smell smoke at your house, it's probably code orange, and so plan accordingly. But it's nice having these extra sensors, and he's actually doing a study about redlined areas and pollution and looking for relationships. But now that he has those sensors out or is placing them, he plans to keep them out so they will be able to supplement some of that data. So we have a lot more data now than we used to back in 2016.
So there's a lot of people that can't stay in the house because they work outside. So what are you recommending to folks? Because there's lots of people that don't have the option.
Right, and EPA has an activity guide and other recommendations. Basically, take frequent breaks, come inside, listen to your body. There's certain symptoms that you might be having. If you have to wear a respirator, check with your doctor, that kind of thing. Just, it is really challenging, I think, for those people that have to work outside.
So the symptoms look like what? Shortness of breath, like lung stuff, sinus headaches.
Yeah.
What do you think you kind of symptoms?
I'm just looking at, I'm pulling it out here. But yeah, it is things like if you have heart and lung problems, ask your doctor. If you have difficulty breathing, if you're dizzy or have symptoms while wearing a respirator, go back, don't go back to a place that has cleaner air. So it's mostly respiratory type things,
Do the KN95 masks not do anything in this?
So basically, according to Chris Austin, our safety officer, now that the public health emergency has ended, we are not allowed to, KN95s were never meant to be used in the United States. And so we are not allowed to give them out as the county, and they may have even destroyed them, I'm not sure. But if you have them at home, I saw, Dr. Jen Aston on the TV the other day saying, hey, the one good thing about COVID, we all got a box of these KN95 masks now, and especially up in New York and places where it was really bad. If you have that, then my opinion is, hey, keep it
So
around in case
it's
you need it. But
no to N95, but okay to KN95 that may provide some relief, or?
other way around. So So the official
But
order.
I mean, you're saying don't wear the N95 masks.
No, I'm making this really confusing, I'm sorry. So basically, KN95, we're not allowed to promote
Right.
those. N95, technically, you're really supposed to be respiratory fit tested, and it was just during COVID emergency that.
Right.
And so that's why, this EPA document was last updated in 2019. And so it's kind of hard, that's why I'm really glad that we had a meeting about it, to all get on the same page this week. We're saying, be careful. It's better to go inside and avoid the bad air than it is to just go about your business. And, you don't want to go for a run with an N95 on.
But if they, and right now, our air quality's in the orange zone. But if you start tipping into red and purple zone, y'all might come out with different advice. But
Yes.
right now, since we're not there, the advice is that.
So code orange is unhealthy for sensitive groups, and generally not a good idea to go outside and do heavy breathing, strenuous exercise, under those conditions. But, like Commissioner Wells said, we've got people that have to work outside all day, every day, so.
Once you get to red, it starts, my daughter's camp, they adjusted things because of this, so this is a warning flag to me. This is going to be the first summer of many where we are looking at more drastic things, and we're in a very good spot right now relatively that it's not purples. But when you start having purples, what does that mean about public works crews and stopping work? What does that mean about public employment, all that type of stuff? We all just got through COVID, but this is a warning flag.
Yeah, one thing that our agency has done is we send out the air quality forecast to all the principals at all the schools in the city and the county. And so I think, that's something that we continue to do.
Actually, other than your website, is purpleair.com, I look at purpleair.com all the time. Is that the next best thing to look at, a full state or region in terms of its air quality?
So we would rather you look at Air Now and go to the fire and smoke map, because it shows our regulatory monitors and the purple air.
Okay.
Purple air, EPA got together back with the fires a few years ago in California. EPA became very concerned because they want the public to go to EPA to find out what the air quality is, not purple air. And people were going to purple air. So they actually had a big meeting and agreed we have a correction factor. The purple air monitors are pretty precise, but they're not very accurate. So they read a little high, but EPA has applied a correction factor to the data because they are very consistent. So they do work well. And so basically now we've got purple air on the EPA site, and
okay.
So
it's
we
an
could
amateur thing for Quaker.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, somebody might be smoking a cigarette next to one. You know what I mean? It's not going through all the QA/QC, and it doesn't have as much rigorous testing. But there are people doing studies like this professor at UNCA where he is following a quality assurance plan. He's co-locating with our regulatory monitors, and he's taking all the steps to make his data more robust. But yeah, the bottom line is we really like the Air Now site the best because you can see those and ours. But the purple airs are really helping, so they are a good tool.
Cool.
Says good today.
Yeah, it's
Good
good.
today. So.
Yeah, the ratings. Thank you. Announcements. Yeah, anybody have any quick thoughts on plastic bags from last time? That was around.
Oh, we're supposed to be having a closed session on that.
Yes, the outcome when we talked last is that there was a desire for a closed session.
Okay.
Because the advocacy groups were assuring that there'd be legal defense and challenge. There was a desire to consult with legal counsel.
It might be my fault that anybody tell
I didn't.
Okay.
It's up to you guys.
Okay. If we were to do one right now, would you have stuff to tell us?
Are we allowed to do a closed session without public notice?
It's not on the agenda, so Go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, who do you want to stay in here? We're just gonna talk about plastic bags, legal authority and whatnot.
We are live.
Yeah, we're live right now.
Yeah.
I guess what came up last night to request that?
I
The
think-
likelihood of a lawsuit?
Brownie, jump in, but the sense, there continues to be a lot of public interest and support. The city is continuing to pursue this with eagerness and enthusiasm and with calculated risk. We got an update on the city's citizen survey, which had nearly 7,000 responses and tremendous amount of support. We also looked at like who responded to that survey and is it representative of the community? Not necessarily, but the people that are excited about this are many and they're very excited. And then the advocacy organizations just kind of made the case for problems with plastic bags and really kind of dug deeply into those challenges, into the why this is important. And I think the risk of pursuing something that isn't crystal clear, that doesn't have explicit allowance from the state is a risk. And we have a history in this part of the state for having the state come at us when we try and be innovative with law. And that would be the summary I had. And it kind of seems like there's a crossroads of, is this a calculated risk? Is this worth taking that type of risk? Brownie, what would you say? Oh, and you're.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much along those same lines, but yeah, I mean, basic question. Do county governments have the legal authority to implement the type of ordinance that's been proposed? You know, yes or no? What are the, because groups have basically said we will sue local governments that do this, right? So I think we should hear from our attorney about those issues and how strong the case is that local governments do have the legal authority to implement such an ordinance. So I think that's the high level purpose for a closed session.
Can I ask a question? When I heard closed session, and this is probably just me having been a county employee for a million years, I assumed we were talking about board of commissioners in closed session, not this group. So what was your
That's what you
thought on
thought
that? Is it?
Yeah, we do that a lot at the whole board, but I did ask Michael whether subcommittees like energy and environment have whether it's permissible for us to go into closed session on this, and Michael indicated that it is permissible. So if this is an area where the Board of Commissioners would be, potentially looking to the committee for a recommendation, then if there is this real legal question out there, to me, it seems appropriate for us to explore that a little bit as part of the kind of due diligence we would be doing on it to potentially make a recommendation one way or the other to the board. But then they probably would want to go into closed session at some point too, to kind of understand that as well, if there are some real question marks hanging around it from a legal standpoint.
Gotcha. I just wanted that. That was my clarity, honestly. I just wasn't sure what that request was. And procedurally, today, because it's not on the agenda, are we in a position to even be able to do that?
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to vote to amend the agenda. I think staff preference would be to do something at the next meeting. That's desire.
Because it would have to at least be on the agenda, or do you have to notice it even?
No.
No, okay.
Just the
just-
meeting, but we would need to change the agenda.
But actually, when we have, it's never on our agenda in the evening.
It is, it's always on there, and then you can use it or not.
Oh, it's just automatically. Okay.
Yeah.
That's why I thought of it.
Idea.
Yeah.
Good, okay,
Closed
that's
session is just always
useful.
listed.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay,
That's why I thought of that. That's why I was like, I must be talking about.
okay.
So do you folks want to do it today or want to do it next time? I'm just thinking because we have time, so.
And who has to make the
And like,
that's a
do you
good
need
question.
some
Yeah.
time?
Well, that's what I'm
Get us
wondering,
some
is
stuff?
actually, does
No,
Michael
that
actually need?
group came to my office a year and a half ago.
Yeah, Mike's thought about this a few times.
Okay,
I
go
think
ahead.
another thing that we as staff have been thinking about that we're not prepared to talk about is what can be done beyond that. So other things, so we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, that is some, just FYI.
In the
behind the
possible
scenes.
world or?
Yeah, so
Okay.
we are working
Alternatives.
to, exactly, to like, well, if we get to this place where we decide that we just don't have this legal authority, so we're maybe not gonna, try and do this, what else, like, what are the pivots? Like, what do we have authority to do? What can we do that can be impactful? What resources might be required in order to do those things, right?
That might be a more complete conversation. I'd ask too that perhaps you reach out to city staff, because we had a similar conversation. And our solid waste manager just presented stuff from hey, if you asked me to have this as a goal, running your solid waste division to reduce this, here's what we have to do. And her conclusion was essentially, it's not feasible or realistically feasible, like financially. And so she had a tough time coming up with alternatives to pull these from the waste stream or do this, that, and the other. But I think that context could be helpful as well. And then I'm meeting with Susanna Knox, who is the legal counsel for this campaign next week. And if any other commissioner wanted to join me at City Bakery, I'm sure you'd be welcome, but she really wanted to make sure that I heard kind of their legal interpretation, so.
CLC attorney.
Yeah, so others are welcome to do that as well. She's not our attorney, but I want to hear her perspective.
Super high level. Like, is there a debate on the authority
Yes,
to do this?
absolutely.
Okay, there's a legal debate.
Yeah.
Depends on who you ask.
Okay.
And I think
That's a
Wilmington
good, that's a
tried,
good place to start.
Wilmington tried to do something, they pulled back. People in industry groups have already told me that a major local retailer with plastic bags that we buy food from is already queued to be a defendant, or I don't know the language, but like, that there's already like people ready to sue. That's very nice to say if you don't want people to do it, I don't know, but
Yeah.
I think this is, so it
So-
sounds
so-
like.
I have a question. I mean, whether we want to do the closed session today, I mean, it would really be just to hear from Michael about the legal question. Like we can't go into closed session and debate all the other pros and cons of the issue. It would be purely to hear this legal guidance on, do local governments have the legal authority to do this? So I guess in a way, because I think we'll definitely need time in other meetings to kind of discuss all the other stuff. But Michael, would you be prepared to go over that today, or would you prefer for us to do it at the next meeting so you have some time to get your information in front of you, or is it kind of in your head? So I kind of feel like it's really sort of questions kind of to you, Michael, whether you would be okay doing it today or whether you'd prefer to have a little bit more time to prepare for that.
No, it's sitting there on the tip of my tongue.
It's ready.
He's ready.
to go.
Well, I would be fine then if we would just do like a brief closed session to hear from Michael on just the legal parts of it, not a larger debate around the merits of the policy as a whole.
Right, that'd be a subject of another discussion. I agree with Brown.
Yeah, is there a motion to go into closed session to hear from the county attorney?
We need to add it to the agenda first.
Okay. Is there a motion to amend the agenda to include a closed session at the end of today's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
And who's keeping the minutes?
I am.
Okay, that'd be pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318. Dot 11.
That is on the
A.
tape.
3.
Ooh, hey, read it,
Yep.
et cetera.
Say that 3 times.
There's a motion and a second to amend the agenda pursuant to statute stated. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
other question is, again, I move best to leave.
Yeah, because I'm not a full member of this committee, so.
Well,
I'm not either, so.
Let's do the motion to the closed session first, and then
Yeah.
what's with that? Is there a motion to go into closed session?
Nothing
Make
done
the
here.
motion to go into
Just
closed
trying to get
session.
out of here.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I
I don't know the answer to that.
Michael.
And we,
No,
since we
everyone-
just went to
How do
closed
we
session.
keep Brownie,
stop it.
how do we keep Brownie on the
Yeah.
phone and everyone else